I've got a bit of follow-up from last week.
Ooh, how exciting.
Obviously, this is just from me because it's not public yet.
Oh, not that exciting then. Okay, go on, shoot.
So one thing we didn't really talk about, and I don't know if we did want to talk about it, but I think it's probably quite a good thing to mention, is our actual rates, what we charge people.
Yeah, sure.
Because I find that there's this great, I don't know, it's trying to get people's rates out of tradespeople can be a bit of a challenge. And I think it's not a bad thing to just talk about rates, providing jobs are getting quoted on a fixed price per job basis, which I think we both do.
Yes, generally speaking. Yeah, I think I might have done a video about, I don't know where we are and where the podcast's going to come out in relation to videos that I've done, but I did a couple of videos on pricing not so long back. You know, I talk about my day rates a little bit in that. And I think we all have a day rate that we base things around, because that makes sense. You know, it's the cost of doing business. You've got to cover the costs of what you do on a daily basis in order to know where you stand, and you know roughly how long things are going to take. So, you know, that's kind of a bare minimum that you need to be charging in order to keep your business ticking along. So daily rates, yeah, I don't disagree. Everybody seems to be quite coy about pricing them. I've always put my prices on my website. I put kind of minimum prices, guide prices alongside the photo gallery, so that if somebody's looking for an alcove cabinet or whatever, they have an idea of what it's about. But I also quote day rates and half day rates. I don't really work on an hourly rate. I don't know about you. Do you do that?
Sometimes. Do you never get calls from customers where they kind of say, well, while you're here, can you just do this? Can you just kind of put these pictures up for us?
Oh, all the time. While you've got a drill in your hand, can you just...
And sometimes those little jobs, you know, if they're tiny, I'll not charge for them, you know. But sometimes they can be quite open-ended. For those sort of jobs, I do say, well, look, I have literally no idea how long this is going to take. I'll just charge it at hourly rate if that's okay. Because sometimes it can be something like, I don't know, I had someone saying, can you fix this table? And it was like an old oak table. It was destroyed. You know, every joint in it was smashed off. You would be looking at recreating various dovetail joints from scratch out of solid oak. And, you know, it could turn into like just a job that could take days.
A restoration job rather than a repair, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was one of those jobs where I think they thought it would take 5 minutes, and it's like, not really. You know, it had already had loads of bodge fixes done to it, and they hadn't worked, and not by me. There was already like 5,000 screws, like holding various bits of it together underneath the table.
And the worst part is these bits of sticks of furniture have incredible sentimental value to the owners. I've got a client who's got exactly the same thing. He's got this little table that is falling apart, but it was his mother's, and it's, you know, he cares about it. But it's in such a bad state of repair. Like you say, there's like a gazillion screws poking through this thing at all kinds of different angles. You want to try and do a nice job, but he never says, well, I'll tell you what, Peter, you take it away and spend a day in the workshop and put it together nicely for me. It's always, while you're there, do you think you can just pop a bit of glue in this? And it's a three-legged table, a little round table with, you know, 3 legs on it, so you can never clamp it happily. or I've never got the clamps where I should start taking them with me. But then, you know, why am I planning this maybe job on the off chance that he wants me to ask me to do it again? Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those jobs where the only way to do it properly is to take it back to the workshop, strip it down to its component parts and rebuild it from scratch. And that might include rebuilding entire legs, because at the end of the day, if the joint is completely smashed off the end of it, there's not a lot you can do other than rebuild that whole bit of wood.
Touch of the grandfather's axe thing, isn't it? This is my grandfather's axe. My father replaced the head and I replaced the handle. You know, there's nothing left of it.
Exactly. So with those kind of open-ended jobs, and sometimes you get people, you know, after put up back in handyman days, I used to do a lot of picture hanging. I'm sure you've done the same.
Oh, yeah.
And so I still get customers now saying, oh, while you're here...
sorry, is that straight, Andy? Is that straight? Yeah. Are you sure that's even?
Yeah. Still get asked now to do quite a lot of picture hanging and stuff while I'm out on a job doing bits and pieces, and they'll just be like, oh, well, while you're here, I've got a couple of pictures that need put up. And then you'll see the couple of pictures and it's like 27 pictures need put up, and some of them don't have any fastenings for them, like there's no hook or wire on them, so you've got to wire them up and everything. Again, with that sort of thing, I just say, look, fine, I'll just charge it at hourly rate. It shouldn't take too long, but it could take a few hours if that's okay. I try generally, I would say 95% of the time I'm not charging on hourly rate, but it's just for those little circumstances that kind of creep in at the last minute. You haven't had time to think it through, and it's just like, right, hourly rate for that. That'll do.
Yeah. I tend to charge a small job rate for that. I mean, it's it's a quick session, and I just accept that I never make any money on those. It's just I treat it as advertising, basically. I could be paying 65 quid to go into a local parish magazine or something, or I could earn, in inverted commas, 50 quid by doing a small job. But if that promotes me in a positive way to that person, then maybe we'll get more work out of it later on, or maybe they'll tell their friends. But typically it's I'll only do the real quick sessions for people that I know already, people I've got history with.
Same here. I don't touch smaller jobs at all for new customers now. It's only if they are a regular customer or an existing customer, and they happen to be. And again, it's coming back to this whole customer retention thing, because you don't want them to go off and find someone else to do those smaller jobs, because at the end of the day, that's how we got into this industry. So if they find someone else to do it,
the guys doing those smaller jobs are going to be angling to get the bigger jobs, because that's life, isn't it?
Exactly. So you don't want to lose those good customers. So you tend to do everything you can to hang on to them. And although I don't think they would go elsewhere, you just don't want to present that opportunity to them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And again, I've always found that it's easier to keep the customers you've got than it is to get new customers. Keep the customers that you've got happy, and they'll keep coming back to you. Obviously, the nature of the size of the jobs that we do now, once you've fitted a set of wardrobes for them, they're probably not going to need another set until they move house or decide to do another room or whatever else. Whereas when we were doing the smaller jobs, there's always smaller jobs that need doing.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned on your pricing video that came out the other week, which is very interesting. I'm looking forward to.
I noticed you didn't have a go, or not publicly anyway.
I didn't. I was debating whether to chat to you offline about it or not. I've got an idea of what I would charge.
Just for the listener, maybe you haven't seen the video, I've done a couple of videos on YouTube about pricing up a job and how I go about pricing a job. It was a job that I didn't, sort of thing I don't normally do, was a large shed and outbuilding. And we'll put a link to the videos in the show notes, but basically I took you through the process, and I invited any of the viewers, any of the subscribers to have a go at pricing this up based on the information I had. I put all the information out there. I put links in the video description to all the websites that I based my prices on, and I told you what my day rate was. So go on, Andy. What was your best guess?
So, well, we'll ignore the fact that I probably wouldn't touch the job because it just sounded like a nightmare.
Yeah, that comes up a lot in the comments.
But I would probably be charging up in this neck of the woods between 1,000 and 1,500 all in for something like that. Down in London, I'm not sure. Working off your day rate of what you mentioned in the video, it would certainly be closer to probably between 1,500 and 2,000.
To cut to the chase, I said in the video I charge £325 a day for my time. We've had a lot of comments on this as well, both a lot of private comments actually through mails and whatever. And I will be doing a quick sort of cost of doing business video, because it's a very standard, you know this, I'm sure, Andy, a perfectly standard calculation to make. You list your fixed costs annually, and then you try and guess how many days a year, how many billable days you're going to be able to work. Divide one by the other, that gives you a viable minimum day rate. And my day rate is $325 a day. It hasn't actually changed for a while. It probably could do with going up. I had a couple of comments to say, it seems a bit light for London. But to cut to the chase, on this particular job, the materials alone were 1150, just under. So a lot of money.
My ballpark on the materials, and I didn't sit down and work it out properly, but our ballpark, maybe 600-700 on materials. But again, I don't know how timber prices compare down there to up here.
You see, you should have checked out the websites. It was all on there, I tell you.
Oh, I couldn't be bothered.
I could barely be bothered with it as well, to be honest.
And then I guessed, about a week to do the work or thereabouts. So hence thinking that kind of. But yeah, okay. So if you're looking 1,100 materials, I suppose you can be well into $2,500 thereabouts, maybe more.
Yeah, 2759 was the final cost on it.
Do you charge VAT?
I'm not VAT registered, no.
No, I'm not either.
I arrange it so that I come in just under the threshold, because I was VAT registered when I was a photographer, and it's just a pain in the neck. An unpaid tax collector.
Oh, absolutely. Anything you can do to avoid paying VAT without actual VAT avoidance. We're not suggesting, illegal activities.
No, anything you can do to stay under the VAT threshold. If the listeners don't know, here in Britain, if your business turns over, I don't know what the value is, about 85,000, I think.
It's about that, yeah.
Somewhere around £85,000 a year. If your turnover is less than that, you're not obliged to charge VAT or value-added tax. Like ourselves, we're working mostly for domestic customers. That's a benefit because it effectively gives you a 20% price cut over anybody else who is VAT registered.
Yeah. And you can voluntarily register, and there are certain circumstances where it might be in your interest to register, even if you're well below the threshold. But generally for our sort of work, you want to do everything you can in your power not to have to charge customers an extra 20%. Because ultimately, if you can get away with charging customers an extra 20%, well, you might as well have that in your own pocket rather than the government's.
Yeah. So yes, this shed job, this outdoor job of mine, came in at 2759. Nobody, because it was a week of my time. I allowed 5 days, and there was a sneaky clue in the thumbnail. Actually, there was on the calculator. It actually says 1625, which is 5 days of my time at $325 a day. So it was really just a question of working that out, my fees plus the materials. And I've got to say, the materials. Obviously, we record these videos a week or three in advance, and the prices did fluctuate, so I didn't expect anybody to get this absolutely right. A few people got close, a few people guessed at 2750. A few people have obviously worked it out reasonably well, and came in around 1,100-1,200 for the materials. The length of time it took varied from a day. Wait, who could do that in a day? I said in the follow-on video, come to London, I can keep you busy if you're going to work that fast and that cheap, for a day all the way through to 7 days. So with most coming in around 4 days. I've allowed 5 working on my own, or 4 days if I had help, and I'd probably need help for the install, because they'd be big panels. And obviously, if you have help, then it's another man day.
See, I wasn't sure if you could change the scope and do it as 2 separate sheds, if that makes sense, side by side.
He was quite adamant that he wanted unbroken panels, he called them, so continuous back. You've got a 3x2 base and a 3x2 roof, 6x1 tunnelized. It's going to be heavy. I hadn't seen the job. I hadn't seen the site, so we might not be able to get it in. And if there wasn't side access, that's not going to go through his house. So you might have to take everything in pieces anyway. So it was only ever a ballpark guesstimate of costs. And nothing came of it. I never heard from the guy. I didn't even get an acknowledgement of the email. So.
And it's one of those jobs where, at the end of the day, if you can go out and buy a shed off Amazon or something for £300, that'll pretty much do the same job. No one's going to spend $3,000 on.
It's interesting, actually. I had a quick look, and there are, custom shed makers online. And the closest I could get, I couldn't get one the same. You can specify the variety of doors and windows or whatever. And it was about £1,100-1,400, and that was for a full height one.
But I'm more thinking, could you go out and get something of a similar size that's just one of these blown plastic, awful things that probably you'll get blown away in the first gust of wind, but a lot of people will compare the price to something like that. They'll go online, they'll be like, oh, well, I can get a plastic or an aluminium shed or something like that for about $500. I'll probably get a wooden one for about the same price, maybe cheaper, since it's
because it's only wood. Yeah,
you'll get that sort of mentality going through people's heads, and
So anyway, it was an interesting exercise, fascinating to get the feedback on it. Well over 100 people took a guess, took a stab at doing the costings. The costing ranged from anywhere from 500 or 600 quid at the low end up to, well, somebody said 85,000 because it was London. Somebody else said 3,000 because it's big enough to rent out as a studio flat. I'm pretty sure I've lived in rooms smaller than that. Somebody else said W4, which is the postcode. W4 equals 10k, which is all you need to know really. But the bulk of the guesswork was sort of 15 to 2,500, but actually more than a third, almost a half, were over £3,000, 3 to 5, which is interesting. So obviously I'm working too cheaply. You haven't mentioned in this what your day rate is, by the way.
My day rate up here is £2.20 a day, or £40 an hour if I am on the clock. But as I say, it's very rare, and that'll only be for existing or regular customers that I would go down the hourly rate route. As was said before, I never very, very rarely charge people on an open-ended day rate. I always give them a fixed price for the job, and then it swings and roundabouts. You win some, you lose some. Going in on an open-ended day rate, you're just opening yourself up for a whole world of pain where you get finished on a job early and people will expect a discount, and it doesn't work like that because they don't want to pay any extra when it takes 2 days longer. I don't mention the day rate to customers. If they ask me, I'll say, I work off roughly £2.20 a day, but I'll just give them a fixed price for the job based on...
And then there's a sharp intake of breath. £2.20 a day, quick mental calculation. That's £1,100 a week.
Yeah, and this is coming back again. I'm assuming both of us aren't driving around in luxury sports cars.
Well, not during the working day, no.
No, exactly. It's just not practical.
No.
In my view, if you do any sort of skilled work and you're charging less than £30 an hour, you can't be making any money. I don't understand people who are going in charging £10 or £20 an hour to do jobs. Because I don't know if you get that down there as much, but I see that a lot up here.
There's a lot of... it's London. There's a lot of everything here. There's a lot of competition from the low end, from, a guy working out the family car with a box of tools and a B&Q drill, all the way through to, big companies with half a dozen guys working for them. There's competition at every possible level. And really, you've just got to find your level of customers, your kind of people who are comfortable paying this kind of money that you want, that you need.
If you're charging a rate where ultimately, if you sit down and work it out, and you could earn significantly more just by working at McDonald's, which if you are charging less than £30 an hour, and you run a joinery business with a workshop and a van and all the tools that you need and everything else that you have to do behind the scenes, if you're charging £30 an hour to the customer, you're probably just about on minimum wage in terms of what you're going to be actually bringing home. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yes, probably. If you're on 30 quid an hour and you're doing jobs by the hour, you're not going to, very rare that you'll get an 8-hour day at that rate, because you're going to be doing an hour here, an hour there. You've got travel time between the hours. You're probably going to be getting 4 hours, actually maybe 5 billable hours in a day at that rate. And that's hard work.
Absolutely. And then there's all the other subsidiary activities of doing accounts and doing your marketing stuff and updating your Facebook and your Instagram and your Twitter and your website and everything else. And I saw an interesting thing on the news the other day, and it was someone from Sage saying that the average admin time that a business spends doing just admin is 120 days a year. 120, that's the average. So as I say, I work it on about $2.20 a day or £40 an hour, but I'm generally always going back to the customer with a fixed price for the job.
Yeah, or sometimes a range. It's probably going to be this much. It might be as much as this.
Yeah, sometimes I'll give customers a range and say, look, until I get started on this, or until you've decided on certain key details of the job, which you might not be deciding until further down the line, then all I can do is give you a kind of ballpark. And I try to avoid that where possible, and that's where doing like all the SketchUp plans and all that sort of thing, which I can't remember if I mentioned on the last podcast or not, but I charge customers normally £100 for doing a plan in advance of doing the job when you're getting into the 3D plans and stuff, which will take us a couple of hours to knock together on SketchUp. And generally what I'll do is I'll knock together a full 3D plan and then upload it onto YouTube, and they can have a proper look inside the furniture and how it's gonna, how it's all gonna work and stuff. And it removes as much ambiguity as possible from the job.
It is fascinating. I used SketchUp for the first time in about 4 or 5 years the other day. I'd done a very quick, very rough freehand sketch. Part of this big job that I'm doing is a laundry, and it's a very tight space, and the clients wanted to change some of the details on it, and the thing has been designed by the designers, but the clients are now dealing with me and want me to change some aspects of it. It just reminded me why I stopped using SketchUp. It's a lot of effort for very little return. I don't charge for plans. The sort of plans I do are typically a very simple working drawings for me, so a 2-dimensional plan,
Keep using it, Peter. Keep using it. It's one of those things you've just got, the more you use it, and I'm terrible. I don't know if I did a video on me doing a fireplace thing on SketchUp a few weeks ago. It's painful to watch because I'm not a great SketchUp user. Anyone who's proficient with SketchUp will be watching that video thinking, why are you doing that? And why aren't you doing that shortcut? And why? And they would have probably had it done in like a quarter of the time. But I wanted to kind of show people how a mediocre beginner user of SketchUp can get by and do a reasonable plan of something in about 15 minutes.
Well, I was reasonably proficient with it when it was relatively new. I got into it. It was great, but I found I was literally spending longer doing the 3D drawings than I was building the actual cabinets or whatever else.
I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a future podcast, perhaps. But
you put a couple of podcast topics on the whiteboard that we share, and I've added a note to say that's going to be a very short one-sided show because I don't use SketchUp or Fusion, so you're just going to have to. It'll be you talking about how you use it rather than me giving any pithy insights.
All I would say is to anyone just starting out, forget about SketchUp, and get straight into Fusion 360, because Fusion 360 is another whole learning curve over and above SketchUp, but the things that it can do that SketchUp can't do is just amazing. Whereas in SketchUp, if you change one little bit of your model, you've got to change every other component to kind of line up with it. So if you alter, let's say you're making an alcove unit and the customer says, oh, actually, I want the whole unit to be slightly narrower. So then you've got to redo the doors, you've got to redo all the shelves, you've got to redo everything in it and adjust everything to make the whole unit smaller. Well, in Fusion 360 with parametric modelling, you don't. Everything is tied together. You can say this trim is a certain percentage of the size of the overall width of the unit. You can do stuff like that. You can say that the doors are always going to be attached onto these edges no matter what. So if I change the size of the edges, change the size of the doors. And you can do all these sort of things in Fusion which just look amazing, but it's such a big product. Jay Bates has done a recent video. I don't know if you're familiar, but Jay Bates has done a load of really, really good SketchUp videos. It looks like he's starting to get into Fusion 360 now, and he's already quite proficient with it, but he's done a video on Fusion 360, which I might include as one of my picks of the week. It looks so complicated, but you can see, once you get your head around it, how much time that could save you. I mean, it's just amazing what that product can do, but it's a big learning curve. Anyway, totally off on a tangent there. And the only other thing that we didn't really touch on as far as the business side of things last week, and we will be going into the business side of things a lot more in future podcasts, I think, anyway, but tech used for jobs. So do you use any sort of technology for quoting for jobs and for managing jobs and calendar management and all that sort of thing?
Overwhelmingly, I just use a notes app to take notes on my phone. I have a physical notebook that I make physical notes in because I find it easier to draw little sketches. The closest I get to techie type stuff when I'm quoting for work is a laser measure. I've got a nice little Bosch laser measure, which is very good, and I managed to leave that behind in somebody's house the other day.
No.
I left it. I was measuring up this laundry room actually because the ceiling's a little bit wonky in it, and managed to knock it into the laundry basket and forgot about it. But other than that, no, not really. A bit old school. I'm a big fan of Talmeter tape measures, Swedish tape measures. They got a little leg that pops out where you can measure the inside of a recess. Do inside measurements. They're really clever. As far as quoting and things, I do all my quoting and estimating via an iPad app. I've got an invoicing sort of app that does all that sort of work for me. I wouldn't particularly recommend it. It's very much designed around having a product that you sell at a price. I do the estimating just in a word processor because it gives you a bit more flexibility. There's a bit more scope for description and that sort of thing. But all the invoicing is just done through that app. Yeah, I've gone through many various versions of doing invoices in different ways. To be honest, an invoicing package, invoicing software is probably a bit of overkill, really. For me anyway, for the sort of business that I run right now, I can quite comfortably go through a month and only produce one or two invoices, just because of the nature of the work I'm doing at the moment. Yeah, that is literally what I'm doing actually.
Yeah, same here. I mean, most customers don't ask for a receipt or invoice at all anyway, so they'll only get an invoice if they ask for one. Obviously, I'm keeping a record of everything on my end. If they're paying by credit card, then they'll automatically get a receipt by email or text message, and that automatically gets sent to them from the iZettle thing, which is great because that basically ticks the box straight away for receipts automatically getting done. Then for commercial customers or people who are paying on credit terms and stuff, I just do an invoice in Excel. And that's all I use. So I just pretty much my business management side of things, the back end side of things is just all Excel based for me. Calendaring, I'm a big user of Google Calendar. I make use of all the shared calendars in it with my wife so she can plan her activities around, so we can always see each other's calendar. We have, effectively, we'll have a personal calendar each, and then we'll have a single shared calendar. All of my jobs, everything go into the shared calendar. So she kind of knows, and because, you get jobs that can maybe run around unsociable hours, or she's wondering when I'm going to get back or whatever, and especially at the minute when the kids are still quite young and I need to coordinate around school drop-offs and things.
We did the same thing when our kids were younger, because they have so much stuff, so many school activities going into the calendars, whereas now we have a shared. In fact, we don't even think we have a family calendar anymore. We just we put important events in each other's calendar, and then I've got a home and a work one separately, and a YouTube one, of course, and now a podcasting one. So
Anyway, our topic for the week. So that's it. Follow up. So today's topic of the week is managing a small workshop.
Yeah, I think we've both got big jobs on at the minute. And very, very full workshops. I know you're doing a load of painting just now of display stands and stuff. So anyway, yes, we've both got big jobs on. I've got this big sort of cabinet and shelving job on at the moment, and I literally could not do it if it wasn't for the fact that I've found some additional storage space. The building that I have my workshop in, we both have similar size workshops. I think mine's a little bit bigger than yours as square footage.
So your shop's about 300 square foot?
It's about 300 square feet. It's about 20 foot long and about 15 or 16 wide, but it's arranged as two rooms. There's a honking great 14-inch thick wall down the middle of it, so that's supporting the rest of the building. That's not coming out anytime soon.
Yeah, and mine's 250 square feet. It's basically, I think I've mentioned before, but it's 2/3 of a double garage effectively. It is about 20 foot by 12.5 foot or thereabouts. So, but it's just one single room effectively. I'm assuming you've got the same problem, but the thing is, especially if you're getting into doing the finishing on projects, which that's another whole topic in its own right, whether or not we should be doing the finishing on projects. I don't mind doing it just for the sake of seeing a finished project and getting that kind of satisfaction of actually getting a project completely done, rather than leaving it in that kind of naked state of bare MDF and then leaving it for someone else to finish. There's something about...
in fact, I can't tell you the last time I installed bare MDF or anything. I always prime it.
Oh, really?
Just because it looks better. I just don't like the look of unfinished MDF.
It varies across the industry, I think. And you've got everything from one end of the scale where the joiner will literally do the woodwork and nothing else. They'll not even do the filling and...
Nothing else. Wouldn't even caulk it, yeah.
Yeah, they'll not even do the filling and caulking. I mean, to me, the bare minimum is that I'll fill it and caulk it and it's ready to paint. But yeah, you've got some joiners who will literally just do the woodwork, and then you've got some who will do everything right through to, they'll have professional spray painting booths and full finishing shops and all this sort of thing. So, and I tend to try, it depends on the job and it depends on the customer. Normally I'll try not to have to paint it because I don't like doing the painting. The only thing I like about doing the painting is seeing the project actually finished at the end of it, and you do get that kind of satisfaction of seeing a finished project and actually knowing that it's been finished well, because I have seen projects that I have built and then either the client's painted it or they've got someone else in to paint it and they've made such a hash of the painting, and it's painful to see when you've spent weeks and weeks building something and then it's been badly painted at the end of the day.
Or the worst, they've chosen it to be painted in some disgusting colour. Oh God, the number of times I've done that, and we've had that thing you do it painted, come and have a look, and you go in and that's lovely, and you choose, lime green or
yeah.
or something.
So I generally don't paint. I would say probably 75% of the time I leave stuff in bare wood, filled and ready to paint. So that's kind of my default stance on work. And probably 25% of the time, as I say, depending on the project, I might do all the finishing as well. But the big challenge with the finishing, because obviously you can do all your undercoating and stuff in the workshop, and potentially you can do the full finishing in your workshop. But the big challenge is that you can't get on with anything else while you're waiting on paint to dry because you've got dust going everywhere. So.
Exactly. It's the biggest headache of all. Is that if you start finishing, if you start painting, then you can't work until the paint's dry because you don't have a finishing room, a separate room for it. It is a pain, and I have done and I do an awful lot of the painting, an awful lot of the finishing, and I just have to arrange the work so I do all the machining and cutting and fabrication and stuff first, and then do the painting. And sometimes you'll paint it in panels, and then it's just relatively straightforward assembly, so there's no additional sort of cutting effectively or machining. On this big job, I have said that I'll do the painting and I'm going to try and spray it, which is going to be a nightmare. I've sprayed a couple of little bits, and as a trial, I did an alcove unit for somebody a few weeks back, and I sprayed it just because the sprayer had arrived that day. I've got a little Graco airless sprayer. It is so quick. It is so fast to do the work, and it is just unbelievably messy. Just staggering amount of overspray on this fine paint dust in the air that then settles. And because it's so fine, it takes so long to settle. It's going to be very, very difficult, very challenging. I would love to have a separate space where I could spray this stuff in.
Yeah, I think if I had a wish for my workshop, if I could go into commercial premises that were worth the upheaval of moving, it would be to have a separate finishing room. That would really help. And not even for spray. Spray would be amazing, but even just having somewhere where I could leave stuff to dry and then get on with other jobs. A drying room where I'm not going to be getting everything covered in dust while the paint's drying. And someone mentioned on a YouTube comment, can I not have a portable spray booth in my workshop? And it's like, well, there's no possible place where I could put it. Until you're actually working in a small space like this, sometimes it comes across a lot bigger on videos than it is.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, at the minute, I'm literally walking in areas that are no bigger than the size of my feet, walking around projects and stuff. And the thought of trying to set up a portable spray booth, and not just that, but then you have to make sure the workshop is immaculate and there's no dust anywhere, because as soon as you start spraying, any dust that's around the object or sawdust that's on the floor or anything like that will get blown in the direction of the thing that you're painting. Your workshop's got to be pretty clean before you start any kind of spraying. And it's just the practicalities of trying to set up a portable spray booth and then dismantle it and where I would store it, and it would just be a nightmare. I can't think of any way I could possibly do that in the setup I've got at the minute. I'm getting by with a roller for now, but I'm pretty good with a roller.
Yeah, me too, actually. And again, the cleanup from spraying as well is one of the things that sort of, this Graco airless is supposed to be, the cleanup's fantastic compared to HVLP or whatever. And yet, compared to putting a roller and a tray in a plastic bag and, and leaving it for a few hours, it's a lot more effort, a lot more work.
So I suppose before talking too much about the pros and cons of small workshops and all that side of things, why have a workshop? Why do you have a workshop? Why aren't you just fully mobile?
I've always had a workshop, even when I was just doing handyman type stuff, because it was a workspace that I had when I sold my photographic studio. I still thought I might be getting some work, and it was a workspace across the street from where I lived. The two reasons we have smaller workshops mostly is cost and convenience, and this hits both of those high points in spades. It's extremely convenient. It's very cheap for London, and it's been fantastic. It was too small as a photographic studio, and it's too small as a workshop, but it's what I have, and it works really well for me. I have never wanted to be the kind of guy who's running around working out the back of his van. You see him everywhere. There's a guy doing some work and he's got a couple of trestles and a board set up at the back of his van, and he's cutting up bits of MDF and trying to edge it or whatever else. And I just don't want to do that kind of work. It's not me. It's not what I want to do. I'd rather work in a small shop, a small space, than have a bigger van.
Yeah, same here. And then you've got all the problems with weather and all that side of things. I did see a thing on Instagram the other day of Joiners. I think he was down south somewhere, but he had an amazing mobile setup to the point that he had a full gazebo, and in the gazebo he had table saw, full workbenches. It was basically a portable joinery workshop, and I thought, okay, if you are going to do it,
that's the way to go.
That's probably the way to do it. I think I've never seen a portable setup like that before. It looked very impressive. I don't really see the practicalities of working out the back of a van. That wouldn't work for the sort of work I do, but it depends on the sort of work that you're doing.
Not for the kind of work we do. If we were still doing handyman type stuff or small jobs, little bits of fixing and tidying things up, trimming a door or whatever else, you could do that. You could work out of the van easily. But then, what do you do? You've got a van full of tools. You can't leave them in the van overnight. You've got to take them out and ship them somewhere.
Well, that's the other side of it. And again, I've seen some amazing van conversions where they've got everything in the van and beautifully panelled out and mitre saw stations and all sorts of things. And it's like, I would be very nervous about leaving all that in the van all the time. But for the sort of work that I do, I couldn't really do that sort of stuff without a workshop. It would be very, very difficult. A van wouldn't be big enough, even your biggest vans, unless you actually had something like a Luton box van or something like that. So you'd have to have stuff set up outside, and even then you've got all sorts of practicality issues. And
certainly around here, parking is the biggest headache for me. Parking is it's why I drive a smallish van, because I'm not. Every now and then I have the slight flight of fancy where I think, maybe I could move up to a transit. And then you'd manage to squeeze into the smallest parking space you've ever seen. And you think, well, maybe not, maybe I'll stick with this little thing for now.
So in your shop, do you have any sort of dust extraction, and how do you handle dust management?
Yeah, I've got two. It's probably worth saying. I think you've done a shop tour video, haven't you? And I've done one as well. We'll pop the links in the podcast show notes. I do. I've got one. I have a small extractor that's permanently hooked up to the chop saw that just serves that one, and I've got a bigger one that's on a sort of a longer kind of flexible hose and a boom arm, and that will actually cover most of the handheld power tools that I use in most of the workshop. And for the odd corners that it doesn't quite reach, then I've got the other one, which I can pull the hose off the chop saw and use that as an extension. So it works pretty well. They're both originally, when I just had it was just had one extractor to my name when I was just a young, poor handyman. I had one. I actually put up a plastic waste pipe system, so I could bring my extractor back, plug the extractor into the waste pipe system, and then that would sort of effectively work at the different sort of workstations around the workshop. And obviously, because the workshop is fairly small, there weren't that many, and it worked reasonably well. Little sort of blast gate stops, but it was a bit clunky to use. And in the end, I ended up with a second extractor. And if I was using one out on a job, then I could always have another one back at base. And then I got a third one. And then as you get busier, you buy more stuff. So I got one big 22-litre extractor under the bench, and a little 10 or 15 one attached to the chop saw. And I've got a real tiddly one that I take out with me to installs and things. And they've all got active power takeoff. So as soon as you run, so what I've done is on the bigger one that serves most of the shop, I've run an extension cord into drop down extensions above all the sort of convenient points on the benches. So anything I plug into that, any power tool will automatically kick off the extractor when it starts to run. So it's quite a neat little system. Yeah,
I've got I can't remember the size of my dust extractor. It's not huge, but it does the job. It's fine. It's a bit noisy. I think the problem with mine is that it's just got one single 100 mil big hefty hose that comes off it, and generally it's always connected to the table saw. But then when I need to use the track saw, I have to use like a series of adapters to bring that down to the festool size, which is a bit of a pain in the neck. So I'd quite like to have even just a small amount of permanent piping connected up so that I can easily switch between the table saw and the track saw, because at the minute it's kind of a bit of a manual mucking about with adapters to change over.
Do you find you use your table saw much? Is it a side saw?
Yeah, all the time. 745, a DeWalt 745.
Oh, DeWalt, yeah, good fence on those. Nice rack and pinion fence.
Brilliant saw. Yeah, I use it all the time. I would say I use it about 50-50 between that and a track saw, mainly for repeated narrow cuts and stuff like that. So if I'm doing a lot of maybe cutting stuff down to, 100 mil, 200 mil stuff for making doors, it could be, for your door frames and the rails and stiles, cutting all them down.
See, I get a lot of that stuff done. I just get strips of 80 mil or 100 mil or whatever it is cut for me by the yard.
Ah, that's interesting. So they'll do it to that degree then?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. Goodness, yes. They did. For this job, I've got 29 mil strips of 22 mil because the sides of the shelf units are all 65 mil thick. So 65 mil 218s gives you 29 mil gap, and they cut me a whole, many lengths of 29 mil just to fit in between. And I'm trying to match the 65 mil thickness to what's already there, so it had to be pretty accurate. Oh yeah, they'll work to millimetre accuracy.
I guess it's going to vary a bit from timber merchant to timber merchant, but once you've got one that you trust implicitly to that degree that you're going to get stuff accurate there.
They've got a big digital panel saw, which they dial in 29 millimeters and it comes out 29 millimeters. It's it's just absolutely fantastic.
It's something maybe I need to look into this a bit more. I'm not sure. It's not causing too much of a problem, to be honest, at the minute. But
again, handling big sheets in a small workshop is a nightmare. So as you say, track saws are fantastic for that, for breaking down big sheets initially.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of the mentality of. I've seen timber yards that only offer up to like 4 cuts per sheet and stuff like that, and I think certainly like your B&Q and some of the big box shifter stores normally have a limit on the number of cuts that they'll do for free. And I think I've probably got that stuck in the back of my mind of, if I am getting the timber merchant to cut stuff up for us, I generally don't get them to do more than about 4 cuts per sheet. But maybe I should just ask them to do a bit more for us. Maybe I'm not pushing them hard enough.
Even if they charge for it, if it makes your life easier, then.
But yeah, so I mainly use the table saw just for your narrower repeat cuts and
narrow rips. Yeah, I mean, I've got a small table saw as well because, again, small shop. I worked wood professionally. I think as about I can't remember exactly, but 12 or 14 years without a table saw, just not on my radar at all. And I bought a cheap one because it was on special, and it's okay. It doesn't. It's a fixed table saw. It's not a sight saw. I can't take it out, and it's only small. But it's a cast iron top, induction motor. Reasonable quality. And for doing narrow rips and cutting wedges are the two things I do in it more than anything. Other than that, it's all done on a track saw, or ideally done by my yard, because they have the means and the will to do it.
I tell you what, I use the table saw a lot for, because I seem to do a lot of floating shelves. I don't know about you, but everyone wants floating shelves up here at the minute. The way I do floating shelves is that I make a bead around, effectively a 20mm wooden battens around as a support frame fitted into the wall, and then fit the shelves around that. I might do a video on it at some point. You can't buy 20mm wood off the shelf, as far as I'm aware. It's not easy to get hold of. Generally, it's going to be 18mm, and then your next jump up from that's probably 34 or 44mm or thereabouts.
You can get 20. As plain software, you get inch plane comes in around about 22, something like that. But it does vary.
Oh no, yeah, sorry, I'm talking about width-wise, not thickness. So what I'll normally do is I'll buy planks of 18mm. Softwood, and then I'll rip the planks down to 20mm wide strips. So effectively your strips of wood are 18 by 20. I do a lot of those. So for making the little bracket things for around the edges, I use the table saw a lot for that. And what I'll normally do is buy in a batch of wood and just spend an hour or so just ripping down maybe 10 lengths of wood down to the 20mm strips, and then I just keep them in stock and use them as I need them, because I use them a lot. So I've got the dust extraction on the table saw most of the time. And is it just that one dust chip collector that covers the whole shop? Yeah, I've got another one that I take around on jobs, just like a wet and dry shop vac type thing. And sometimes that'll end up in the workshop, more for cleanups and stuff than anything else. But essentially in the shop, I've just got the one dust extractor at the minute. And as I say, it does the job. Yeah, and small workshops, small workspaces, one will cover most things, won't it? Yeah, I could just do with some, not a huge amount of permanent piping to it, but just a little bit, just to make it a bit easier for connecting a few things up to. I don't have dust extraction on my miter saw at all, but the inbuilt dust extraction on the DeWalt is pretty good, just to the bag. And then anything else, I'll just hook up to the Festool hose generally. So if I'm using sanders or whatever, but that's another whole topic. And do you have an air cleaner of any description? I was going to ask you about that as well. I made a couple from bathroom fans, and they're not really very effective at all. So I'm toying with just buying one, because there's a record one you can get for 150, 170 quid, something like that. Yeah, it's next on my list. I'll be doing the same. It's a record one. I've heard Axminster do one as well, but I think theirs is about 300 or something. I don't need anything fancy. Yeah, dust collection, the tool is generally very good. Again, maybe a topic for another podcast, but I use a lot of Festool tools. Well, you're in London, I suppose. Oh, stop it. But they're good. They're good, solid industrial machines. And I'm loving my track, so I have to say that's one of my best purchases, probably of last year. The TS55, lovely saw. Yeah, they're fantastic. So yeah, dust collection, the tool is generally very good, but it's anybody who says, it's dustless is just isn't being serious, because there's always dust in the air. There's always dust that escapes. I've got a little air monitor, actually, a little. What else can you call it? Gives you the particle quantities. It's generally not too bad, actually. It's about 40 quid, 40 quid. Just a simple little thing. And it's how I knew that the paint spraying was putting, sub third of a micron particles in the air, not just because you can see it, but the levels went way, way, way high. And took a long time to come back down to normal levels. So definitely, if you are spraying at all, you've got to wear a face mask, got to wear a P3 mask. And I've got to confess, I don't generally wear a mask when I'm cutting, because the dust collection is really pretty good. If I know when I'm trimming, sometimes I use a track saw just to trim the very edge
back slightly just to clean up an edge, or I get something cut by my yard. I'm doing some veneered board at the minute, and I've had them cut it approximately to size, and I'm just fine tuning it because I wasn't sure exactly how big the face frames on this thing were going to be. So I couldn't get the boards cut exactly. So they just need sort of a couple of mil shaving off here and there. Then I'll use a mask when I've got my face close to the saw, or if I'm trimming an edge back where anything less than 2 millimeters, the dust collection's not good because there's the blade isn't enclosed by the timber.
Yeah, I've got it's not an amazing face mask. It's just like a sight Screwfix one. It's not your bottom of the range kind of surgical mask type ones.
Well, better than nothing.
It's got changeable filters on and all that sort of thing, and it does the job.
Which you've changed every 35 days, haven't you?
We'll just brush on from that point. But I have been debating getting a proper kind of all overhead one. You can get the ones with a motorised fan built into them.
Makes you look like a spaceman. Yeah, absolutely.
Big problem with your normal masks, especially trying to wear them while you've got safety glasses on, and if you've got any sort of facial hair, anything like that kind of stops it getting a good seal on your face. And if you go for the full overhead mask, then it kind of gets around a lot of those problems, and but they're quite expensive.
Yeah,
and it's like, well,
but what price your lungs?
Well, yeah, but would I be better off putting that money into better dust extraction at the source, or better like a better dust extractor or better piping so that I can easily connect the dust extraction up? So if I'm going to spend 300-ish maybe on a good full face mask, full head mask or whatever it's called, and then the cost of the filters on top of that, I don't know. I'm tempted to get one of those air monitors and see how bad it is. I think it's probably a lot worse.
40 quid well spent, I think. A just cheap little simple domestic thing, comes from China, shocker. It doesn't record, so you've got to sort of actively keep an eye on it and see what levels you're actually getting. But it's fascinating, very, very interesting to do.
I'm tempted to get one of those and an air cleaner and then review the situation after that. And then if it's still dangerously high, I might get one of these fancy all-overhead masks. But it's the practicalities of, would I bother putting it on? Because it's like, when it becomes that level of hassle, generally, I don't put the normal mask on all the time at the minute. If it's a great big clunky thing, and the problem with the great big clunky things as well is with the all-in-one face visor and everything, is that gets covered in dust when it's sitting around your shop. So every time you pick it up, you're going to have to clean it before you can use it.
Yeah. Also, I'm a spectacle wearer. I wear glasses, so you've got the fogging up problem. It's difficult for me to wear safety glasses. Oh, these are toughened lenses, so they're as safe as they can be, but of course they're still, around the edges. You can get prescription safety glasses, but they look like, Joe 90 from the 1960s or whatever. So it's difficult. It's problematic. I don't know what all the answers are really. The over the head ones will solve all of those problems, the fogging and the fact that I wear glasses and all the rest of it. But as you say, can you be bothered? If it's too much effort to do, then you probably won't do it.
Well, just think of the practicalities of it. The first thing you're going to do when you put it on, it's going to be covered in dust, because if I put anything down in my workshop for 15 seconds, it's covered in dust. So the first thing I'll have to do is blow it down with the air compressor or whatever, and or wipe it down with a cloth or whatever. So that's straight away getting dust into the air, which you're going to breathe in before you've even got the mask on. Potentially, you're sealing the dust inside the mask. Jury's out for me. I think I'm going to do the air monitor. That sounds like a really good idea. I hadn't thought of that. I'm going to do the air monitor and get the air cleaner and take it from there. I think that's probably going to... And then just continue to use the mask that I've got. And I think between those three things, I think that's probably the best compromise between having something that I'll actually use and something that really, really does the job very well that I'll never bother to use because of other impracticalities. Have you got a compressor in your shop?
I've got a tiddly little DeWalt 4.5, 5 litre one, which I bought because it was small, basically. And I had a really cheap Silverline nail gun, little 16 gauge nailer, which was fantastic. Actually, 20 quid, 22, something like that. It's been absolutely faultless, second fix nailer. But that's pretty much all I use it for. And now I've moved on to, I don't use nailers that much, it turns out. And I've got I prefer Mains electric, or I've actually got the Ryobi Airstrike stapler, which is very good. So I don't use it very much. It gets used for pumping up bicycle tyres more.
Right, interesting. I've got quite a big compressor in the shop, and then I've got a little Stanley portable one that I take out to jobs, just because I've got a little Bostitch nailer that I use quite often on setting fix and putting trims in and all that sort of thing. I don't have a pin nailer because generally for very, very small stuff I just use CA glue, and I find that works very, very well for very delicate trims and stuff like that. I find CA glue.
Big fan of electric mains nailers, mains powered pinners. I've got a 16 gauge Maestri nailer stapler, and I've got a 21 gauge spot nails mains power veneer pinner. I quite like a 23, and I think Makita have just started making a 23 gauge cordless. So, but a 10.8 volt.
I've read mixed reviews on...
Oh, really?
I don't want to diss Makita specifically because I don't know if they've resolved a lot of the problems that they've had, but I know they did have problems with some of the battery nailers that they had, just with misfires and all sorts of things. But I think it's technology that'll hopefully just get better over time, and then I can ditch my compressors. But I do find that I use the compressor in the shop a lot, just for blowing stuff down maybe before painting and just getting,
you're just moving the dust away, aren't you? You're not actually getting rid of it.
I know. That's my approach to cleaning the shop, is that I just move the dust from one place to another. But yeah, I use it a lot for moving the dust out of the area where I'm going to be painting and moving it to a different area. I use it for that. I've got a little air sander that I sometimes use, and my purchase of the Century is an air-powered kind of Dremel. It's not made by Dremel, but it's a little, what would you call them? Kind of little micro cutter type.
I don't know what you call them. Dremels. There you go. We all know what you mean. Yeah.
So you can put all, I think, normal Dremel attachments and everything all fit into it, and you can use it for all sorts of things.
So what's the benefit of an air-powered one then?
It's 20 quid versus 300.
Fair.
So I couldn't really justify an expensive Dremel because I don't use one very often. And yeah, it was literally for an air-powered equivalent, it's 20 or 30 quid, and it does exactly the same job. And for the amount that I use one, it's great. If I was using a Dremel all the time, I would probably buy a proper one or a battery one or whatever. And to be honest, I was torn between the mains Dremel and the battery Dremel, and I was like, which one should I get? And I just couldn't decide. And then I saw this Air one for 30 quid, and it was like, I'll get that one.
30 quid is worth a try, isn't it? And see how it is.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a little, I think it's Air Bauer, a little Screwfix brand Bauer one, and absolutely brilliant. I'll put a link in the show notes.
I've got to say, for Screwfix is a British online retailer with some trade counters as well. They have their own brands. They have Titan, which is an own brand, and I've got one of their bandsaws, which is surprisingly good. But the Airbauer seems to the Airbauer brand seems to get some very good reviews for some of their tools. I know somebody who's got a thicknesser, and he bought it because it was, he needed one quickly because his DeWalt or whatever broke, and he's used all kinds, and he reckons it's just as good as any of them.
Yeah, I've got a few Airbauer tools and never had any problems with any of them. They've all been great. Something we might talk about on a future podcast.
Well, cheap tool versus expensive tool. There's a topic. Yeah.
Just bought a lovely little DeWalt sander that I'm over the moon with. I'm going to do a video on that. Just a little palm sander, 5-inch.
What's the stroke on it? What's the orbit?
I don't know off the top of my head, but
oh, come on! You need this stuff. Yeah. You need to know these things.
Wait. I don't think it even told us that when I bought it.
God.
Hold on.
All right. You do your search, I'll fill. One of the things that I find, for years and years and years, I had a 6-inch, 150mm random orbit sander, and it was a workhorse. It was just a fantastic piece of kit. And then you do a lot of sanding when we do this kind of work, and I started getting a little bit more into the slightly more esoteric sanders, and I've got two different 6-inch random orbital sanders with different strokes. I've got a 5-inch with a slightly smaller stroke again. I've got linear sanders. I've got orbital sanders. I've got the Rotex sanders, which are the gear-driven sanders, which can be very aggressive, or you can use them as polishers as well. I think of individual tools, I have more sanders than anything else. Possibly routers. I think I worked out I had sort of about 7 or 8 routers, but in terms of sanders, they're my most used and most populous individual power tools.
Well, I've been getting by with just a 6-inch Bauer orbital sander for the last couple of years, and it's done the job, but it's just big and chunky, and the dust extraction on it is completely proprietary, ridiculous connector on it. The dust extraction's not very good on it anyway. I didn't want to spend too much on one because I needed one in a hurry, and I didn't really have time to do that much research. And this one seemed to get pretty good reviews. I've just got the specs up here. It says it's a 2.6 millimeter orbit.
2.6, same as mine actually. It's a great finishing sander, that sort of size and that sort of stroke. You wouldn't want to use it to try and strip paint off a door or anything, but I use it for. I use mine for again, just as part of the learning process, playing with spraying. The level of finishing you need to do on edges and things needs to be that much higher, that much better. So it's particularly good for that little 5-inch random orbital with a small stroke and a fine grit. The edge of a piece of cut MDF comes up almost polished, it's like immaculate.
If you prime the edge of your MDF board and let it dry and then run over it with this, it's literally pretty much a polished edge that you're getting out of it. It's lovely. And so it's 8,000 to 12,000 RPM.
I thought you were going to say pounds, crikey.
Pounds, yeah. No, it was only 100 quid. It's a DeWalt 6423. The thing I really like about it, the dust extraction seems amazing, even without a dust hose on it. It's like a little Hoover. I'm going to do a video on it. It's amazing. Even just using the little dust bag that comes with it, it leaves no dust behind. It's just incredible. I don't know why I ended up talking about sanders, but that's quite a nice little purchase that I've made.
Small sander for a small shop. There we are.
Small sander for a small shop, but that's my purchase of the month, or purchase of last month. That little DeWalt. Oh yeah, because we're talking about a Bauer, and
back on track.
The main sander I had before that, the orbital one, was an Bauer, and that's still going strong. It's a bit chunky and heavy, and the dust extraction's not very good on it.
I had the Metabo, whatever it was, 450, the dual orbit thing, which never worked very well. But as a sander, it was terrific. A real workhorse. And then I made the mistake of using something significantly better, and had my my expectations changed forever. So yes, dust collection is very important, and is much better on the ones that I have now. I may have done a few videos on that in the not too distant past, where I compare a cheaper, lower priced orbital sander to the ones that I'm using. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, as per usual, we've gone off on that many tangents. We just haven't talked about the thing that we're going to talk about, but I'm sure it'll come up again on a future show. What have you been watching or listening this week? Have you got any picks for the week at all?
Not particularly, to be honest. I've been head down grafting this week. I'm really getting into the swing of this big job. I've been in the workshop for a couple of hours this morning before we started talking, and also recorded a couple of voiceovers before we actually started doing our chat. And I'll be doing another couple before going back on across the road to get stuck into the rest of the work. So I've been very remiss about keeping up to date with anything. I'm working my way through the Menu Bar podcast, which was one that I mentioned last week, I think, which is good fun. And of course, there's always the usual kind of stuff. There's the Making It podcast, of course, from Jimmy DeResta and Bob and the other guy,
David Picciuto.
David Picciuto, that's the one. Yeah. How about yourself?
I'm going to give a quick shout out to Phil Makes Things, who has a lovely little channel. I think he's only got kind of 300 subscribers or thereabouts, but he just, he's a garage maker. He's got a little shop in his garage, and he's just does lovely videos of just making random things. He's not using a massive array of machinery and all this sort of things. And his videos are just really nicely made, nicely produced, nicely put together. So big shout out to Phil from Phil makes things. He deserves many more subscribers to his channel, and hopefully we'll see a lot more from him.
Excellent. Somebody I've been watching on YouTube, actually, who came up because in my searches trying to find a bit more information about spraying, is a guy called the London Craftsman. I don't actually know his name, and he hasn't posted much on his channel for a while. But he does similar kind of work to us, but using Graco airless sprayers, and he's got it looks like a garden shed, about the sort of size that the one I was trying to quote on the other day.
I've seen that video. I've watched that with great envy, and he's got like the 2 big sprayers in the boxes.
That's right. Yeah, he's got one. Yeah, he's got one set up for primer and one set up for eggshell, which is 99% of what I do is in a white eggshell finish. So yeah, he had some really nice little bits and pieces of work in there. It's really good.
When you see him paint something and it's like, what, that's it done? And it's like, it literally takes, less than 15 seconds to do a coat or thereabouts. And it's like, wow. And the quality of the finish just looks stunning as well. And then he's got all his drying racks. And yeah, I look at that paint room with envy. One day I'd love to have a setup like that.
I'd love to have a workshop the size of his paint room, to be honest, but hey.
Yeah.
One day, Rodney.
Cool. Well, we'll wrap it up for today, and this is our last pre-recorded one. We're going to be live from the next one onwards, if that makes sense. So these will be launched if all the technology works, which is the nerve-wracking bit.
Fingers crossed, we'll have some proper live follow-up or follow-on to do from our many listeners, both of them probably.
Absolutely. Any follow-up, just post it to our Twitter, Measuring Up PC, I think it is on Twitter. We'll include links to all of that sort of thing in the show notes. We've got Instagram now as well. Your best place to find the podcast is just at measuringuppodcast.com if you want to share it around or anything like that. Where do we find you on YouTube, Peter?
You can find me on YouTube at 10minuteworkshop.tv. That's number 10 or a TEN. We'll take you straight to my YouTube channel, or for personal work, for jobby job type jobs. Go to petermillard.com and you can always find me through there. What's your best way of getting in touch, Andy?
My YouTube is Gosforth Handyman on YouTube. And obviously, if you want to help support this podcast, you can do so at Patreon. There'll be a link in the show notes to that as well. But Measuring Up Podcast on Patreon.
Patreon.com/Measuring Up Podcast is where you'll find our page there. As always, Andy, absolute pleasure having a talk to you. This is very rapidly becoming my favourite conversation of the week. I really look forward to it, and it's great to be able to bounce ideas off somebody else in the business like this. And I hope our listeners are enjoying it as well. We'll find out soon enough.
Same here. Well, that's the thing. When you're trapped on your own in a workshop all week, it's nice to actually talk to someone that is interested in the stuff that you do.
We'll try and keep it more on track in future, but for now, this is what you get.
Yeah, indeedy. We'll catch you all on the next episode, which will be theoretically in 2 weeks' time. Monday mornings that these come out, but just keep an eye on the website. You'll see when the next one comes out.
Or better still, just subscribe to the podcast through your podcast player of choice, and then it'll just pop up in your feed whenever there's a new episode ready.
Indeedy. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Always a pleasure. Take care.